Hi again, this is Bob.
This is Archie.
It's time for another episode. Today we're going to talk about obstacles. This could be interesting.
Yes.
So let's start off with there are various types of obstacles in our lives, in our careers, and we've had to deal with them. I'm going to use a small example. I don't have a college degree. That was somewhat of an obstacle with me getting into the industry. Fortunately, at the time I did, there was a great need for people. I went to an electronic school, which didn't really teach me much about computers at all. I got to learn about TVs and transistor radios. And if you don't know what a transistor radio is, you're going to have to Google that one. I built my own. But I was able, through contacts with the school, I was able to get a job at Honeywell. I also had a great interview with IBM. They came to the school and interviewed us. So I went in without a degree. Turns out later, I didn't realize it at the time, the school was unaccredited. It got later bought out by Johnson & Wales.
Which is what? What is Johnson & Wales?
Johnson & Wales is a college in Rhode Island. So, lack of a degree has come up in a number of interviews early in my career. But over time, my experience overrode all that. And as far as education, a couple of times it's come up later in my career saying, hey, you don't have a degree in such and such. I go, yeah, I've got that experience, though.
It's back when we were coming out of, back when I started working in the early 80s, education was a big deal. I mean, when I went to Bell Labs, it was the kind of thing where it wasn't only that you had to have a degree, you had to have the degree you had to go to college straight out of high school. If you were one of those people who, for whatever reason, ended up spending a year or two working, doing something else, and then went to college at night and got your degree, that didn't count. You still weren't going to get promoted because you didn't go straight out of high school into college. So, I mean, education was like
Paramount.
it was absolutely paramount. I mean, I always joke that there's nothing that I'm doing today that I couldn't do out of high school, and you're kind of proof of that, right?
Absolutely.
But if I didn't have that degree, I wouldn't be here. Let's put it that way.
So I was fortunate enough to, honestly, I went back to college a number of times when I worked for companies that would pay for it. But the field of technical writing was changing so much.
Yes.
I was going for a degree in computer science, and I was going for a degree in information technology. Then they actually had a degree program for technical writing, and when I took a look at it, I said, "I'm already doing all this. Why should I pay for someone to teach me what I already know?"
I will say that two things. Okay, I grew up in the inner city. I'm African American. When I went to college, when I went to high school, okay, I was a writer. I've always had that talent. It comes very easily to me. I used to write for the school newspapers, all this other stuff. But when I was coming out of high school, back then, for a person of color, black person in particular, they usually sent you into STEM because it's just like sports and entertainment.
STEM?
I forget what the letters stand for, but basically technical. Engineering, whether it's math or science.
Technical
science,
courses.
Yeah, technical stuff. So I was pushed into electrical engineering because from the point of view of the school council or whatever, that was the only way I was going to succeed. And in fact, when I changed majors in middle of college and went into technical writing, the first reaction my mother had was, "Black people can't make money as writers," and that was probably true back then, right? But I told her, no, it's technical writing. It's different, so don't worry about it. But so my whole career has been around because, okay, so I was lucky that when I came out in the 80s, when I came out of college in the 80s, affirmative action was full tilt. So I got a lot of opportunities because of that. Now, just because I got the opportunity didn't mean I was going to succeed. And I can tell stories about people who got into companies on affirmative action and,
they didn't have the talent.
They didn't have the talent. They didn't have the skill set. So it's, how you get an opportunity is immaterial. It's what you do with it. But it's still some of the other stories I've told already in this thing. in hindsight, I realized had a racial component to them. Because when I was younger, I didn't think that way. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm on a trajectory. I got something I want to do, and if you're in my way, I'm going to move you out of my way. And I don't care what your reasons for being in my way. I'm going to get you out of my way. In hindsight, later, as I'm ending my career or coming to the ends of my career, I'm thinking, yeah, you know, that was racism. That guy didn't like me because it wasn't had anything to do with my competency. He just had a problem with me. So anyway,
Well, not you, but your race.
right, my race. Right. And so I laugh at some of the things that people thought they could get away with, because one of the double-edged sword of affirmative action is okay, so you get an opportunity to go in there, and a lot of people then judge you based on, well, he doesn't belong here. He just got in because of affirmative action. And of course, many people have made the statement that I went to a private school. So I went to school with a lot of rich white kids. And there were some really, really brilliant kids at that school, and there's some real idiots. But guess what? Those idiots make more money than you and I both.
Oh,
so, okay, some of them are doctors, some of them are stockbrokers, all this other stuff, because their dads own these companies. Right?
Yeah, I think you told me some names to not go.
Exactly.
Don't see this guy.
I will not say that on the air, but yes, there were some guys that were just like really, really stupid. But they get the legacy admissions. They get in. I'll always use the example of this guy who he went to. Okay, I guess his parents wanted him to be a doctor because his dad was a doctor. He couldn't get into medical school. He couldn't cut it. He couldn't get into medical school. So they sent him to the Caribbean. Then brought him back. And then he's the guy that I was telling you that, yeah, you don't want to go.
You don't want to go.
You don't want to go to him. But that's privilege. That's what when people talk about privilege, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, money.
I couldn't do that, obviously. So
Right.
it's not just money. It's also connections.
Connections, yeah.
So
one of the things I think we need to point out is that both you and I come from, well, we'll call it very humble backgrounds.
Yes.
In other words, very poor families.
Yes.
The obstacle that I had to face was I came from a very dysfunctional family. It caused me lots of problems. And it also obfuscated what my obstacles were and were not. So I didn't know what opportunities I could have had. I didn't know the obstacles that were in front of me until I ran into them.
Right.
So through high school and stuff, I was accepted in some colleges because I had a very good score on my SATs, and I had no confidence that I could afford a college, and I felt I had no one to back me up, and I never got any good advice. The school I went to wasn't the best of high schools. So I went in and took the only road out that I could see was this electronic school, which was 2 years. Now, it could have been a very bad idea. It could have been a very bad path to take, but I made it work. They had some connections, which is key, and I ended up getting into the industry 2 years earlier than most people of my age, because it was only a 2-year school. I got into manufacturing, and from there I found myself somewhere along the line. I told the story about how I became a writer, and then found my niche, and then took off with it. But those were turbulent years, and having that lack of support was a huge obstacle to me. Having the lack of education eroded my self-confidence in the beginning. So I wasn't very confident in myself.
And the funny thing is, I mean, as you tell the story about not worrying about being able to afford college, back then when you were coming out of high school, there was all kinds of programs for folks like you, but you didn't know about it.
I didn't know about any of them.
Right. So, because that's how I went to school. I didn't. My family was also poor, and but one of the things about going to a private school is that when you go to a school like that, the assumption is that you're going to college. That's what the school is all about. They call it a preparatory school, preparatory day school. So it's all about getting you into college and getting you through. That's why I say when I went to college, it was just a repeat of high school, most of it. Okay,
Right.
because they had prepared me for all of that stuff.
You went to a good high school. Your parents are very supportive of you.
Okay, so just to go back a little bit. The way it worked was my mother was a school aide, public school aide, right? The lunch aide. She was one of those people that ran around and tried to keep the kids from getting outlined and all that stuff. It was, when I was in elementary school, I was a bright kid. The principal of school knew my mother, and came to my mother as I was graduating elementary school and going to go to high school. And I was going to go to this school called Rothschild High School in Brooklyn, and they used to nickname it Roughchild. And the principal went to my mom and said, "You can't send him there. They'll kill him there." My mother was telling me the story. They said, "Yeah, you can't send him there. They'll kill him there." So that woman, that principal, called in some favors and got me a full scholarship to this private school. That's how I ended up there, right? And my mother had to take another job to pay for all that. The tuition was paid for, but if you ever, people who go to private school know that this sports equipment, there's books, there's uniforms, there's money. So she had to take another job to pay for all that crap to get me through that school. So, but that's my background. That's how I got into college, and yeah.
But you had a wonderful opportunity. It shows that there are a lot of people in the educational system that are looking out for people with serious potential,
right,
and trying to do the best for them, even when the system itself wasn't doing so well.
Right. It was. I remember my sixth grade teacher. For whatever reason, she didn't like me, probably because I was not. I didn't fit her stereotype of a young black boy or whatever. So she tried to undercut me a little bit. She was giving me bad reviews and stuff like that in that last year. But then, her last comment had to be, "Well, except at the private school." It's like, okay, never mind. So yeah, but and the thing is, again, I'm thinking of all this stuff in hindsight, because back then it didn't register. It's like I don't know, I'm just kind of sailing along.
Yeah.
The only thing in my mind was I wanted to get out of the projects. That was it.
Yes, we talked about that before. We both
Yeah.
felt we were leading a life that wasn't ours, and we
Yeah.
needed to do better.
That's right.
And we did. Now, one of the things that I moved around a lot when I was young, being in a dysfunctional family, and I actually went to a very good middle school. And when I went to the high school that I would eventually go to, it was like stepping back a grade from a really good school system to a poor school system. And so when it came time to do the college thing, it was I had the football coach as a guidance counselor, and I wasn't an athlete. So so I didn't get any advice. So it was pretty poor. I lucked out with the electronic school, and that was my opportunity to get in. So just these aren't bitter grapes,
No.
sour grapes.
No.
I guess is the right word.
It's just what happened, right?
It's what happened.
Yeah.
You have no idea what you're going through while you're going through it.
Exactly.
We did have that ambition to make our lives better, and then we found our opportunities. We got through that, but these were obstacles we had to deal with.
And fortunately for us, I think we share this. At the time, they weren't really obstacles. We were just making our way and getting to where we wanted to go. And then later on, you look at it and say, well, yeah, I overcame all that stuff. There are a lot of people who don't get out of that. They get trapped, and we didn't, because we had eyes on the prize, as they say.
Well, one of the things about obstacles is that you don't always know it's an obstacle till after you've gone by it.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's really, because a little bit off topic. Okay, so
We're always off topic. Don't worry about it.
In Brooklyn at that time, where I was growing up in the projects, it was the crack was the big scourge in the black community back then, and people got trapped in that. And I remember, and I always say to people, because I'm glad they've changed they used to call them dope pushers. I'm your pusher man, but now they say dealers, which I think is appropriate, because, I grew up with drugs all around me. I had no interest in it whatsoever, and nobody ever forced it on me. So, there was no pushing going on. It's like, if you wanted it, they provided it. But if you didn't want it, they left you alone. So, and so I got through all of that because, I was never even tempted. I had no interest whatsoever in that culture. So,
Yeah, I was very focused on doing something better. So I managed to get past the drug thing myself, which was great. But again, these aren't sour grapes. These were tough beginnings. These are the obstacles we had to face. You, as a person of color, you had to deal with that an awful lot. Me being essentially a welfare child, had that stigma placed on me, and it was tough getting through. And even when I went through electronic school, um, I didn't have the money or anybody supporting me, and so it was always dealing with things myself, not having the extra money to get a good car. So I had the poor car. I had always, which is kind of a stigma again in a young adulthood. Again, I didn't realize these were obstacles. I was still struggling to survive. I was struggling to thrive.
Well, I mean, in the inner city, the good news is I never had to have a car, so that's an expense I didn't have to worry about. But I will say that when I graduated high school, I applied to 2 colleges, both within walking distance of home. One said yes, one said no, and I went to the one that said yes, and that's it. I did not even think about like going away to college because that was not affordable. Right?
Where I lived, it was there was nothing there. If you wanted to go anywhere, you definitely needed transportation.
Well, that's one of the advantages of being in the inner city is everything's nearby.
Yeah.
So
No, I was out in the towns. So that was the beginnings of our obstacles, and so we had to face a lot of obstacles in our careers. I'm going to talk about a different type of obstacle. I had this supervisor who was dead set against me. It seemed I was anxious to move on with my career, to move from hardware writing to software writing, and this person didn't seem to like change at all, which is. And I love change.
yeah.
And so he actually held me back and refused to give me the opportunities that I'd asked for. And when he did give me an opportunity, he set me up for failure. He was being an obstacle himself. He set me up for failure. He says, "Okay, you want to do a software guide?" The writer that was on the software installation guide went out on sick leave. You got 2 weeks.
Yep.
And so I grabbed it, knowing that I couldn't be successful, but putting it out there as fast as I could. I made the delivery on time, and it wasn't very good. The manual, I didn't really have the real time. So he set me up for failure, and then of course all this started coming down. What I did was I took that same manual and I'm going to revise it, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to do well the first time around. I'd already set myself up in my mind to go back, take the comments that I was getting, including, well, I won't call them insults, but they weren't that far from it, and then do something better with it, and then show this the people that I knew what I was doing, and by doing that, by going around my supervisor, I ended up getting the confidence of all the people that would be using them at customer support and people who teach and the engineers. And so I kind of went through them. And he gave me a poor review. Well, started giving me a poor review, but that didn't work out too well on his behalf. So I had obstacles like that too. People who were trying to, for whatever reason, I didn't really take it personally. He just didn't know how to manage me.
Right. I mean, I will say that one of the things, actually, this is more digital than any place else. When they hired me, I remember it was a weird kind of thing. Is that I think I had one person who wanted to hire me, another person who didn't. Namely, the head of the department didn't. I don't think wanted to hire me. But again, because of affirmative action, that person knew that it would be a feather in her cap if she hired me, so she hired me. Now, once I got in there, I remember, and I was doing very, very well. I mean, my first year, I was doing great. But then we were at this party, this corporate event, and I'm being told by one of the managers there, said, "Well, when we hired you, we figured, well, if you can't write, we'll teach them." I had just come out of one of the top companies in the country. Okay, AT&T only hired the best and brightest, that kind of thing, and they're talking about me like that. Anyway, so that's what I mean. That's the kind of crap.
Don't use bad words here.
Yeah. What is it? The just low expectations. They even when I was getting promoted to management, right? They're dragging their feet. I think I told the story already about how they described the job I was going to take, And I said to them, you said being set up for failure. I actually said to the manager who was describing what the job I was going to take, I said, it sounds like you're setting me up for failure. And he said, oh, no, 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 no. Now, in my own mind, I'm like, this is great because if I fail, that's an expectation. But if I don't fail, I'm good. And of course, I didn't fail. I became one of their best managers. I think the second best manager in the department in a year. Okay. In fact, my boss at the time wanted to give me a top rating and was told not to because it's not. You don't do that.
Right. I ran across that a couple of
Yeah.
times myself.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one of those things where, like you said, when you're in it, you don't really think about it. Because I was pestering that manager when they said, okay, you're in line for this promotion, and a couple of months went by, and I went to the head of the department. I said, what's going on with this? When is this going to happen? And she's like, this is a really tough job. Then when I got it, like I said, I did very, very well in very, very short order. So, because I knew I could do it. I had no doubts in my own mind that I could do the job, and I did.
So we keep on pestering and beating these obstacles. I always like to say, if I can't go around an obstacle or under an obstacle and over an obstacle, I'll just have to go through the obstacle.
That's right. That's right. So.
But yeah, it is funny because in hindsight is when I realize how many of these were obstacles, how many things were trying to hold me back. During the time that it was happening, I just saw a problem and I was trying to find a solution for that problem.
Right.
I didn't see any of these as like, oh my God, you're doing this to me on purpose? What? I don't understand. Being a manager, you should want me to succeed.
Well, one of the things I used to teach at I taught a course at Northeastern. It was a course of my own design. And one of the things I talked about is how to overcome obstacles. So you have an idea and you want to pursue the idea. You go to your manager and your manager says no. And I was saying this to class. I said, it's a great idea, and you've talked to other people and they think it's a great idea. Don't think your boss is gonna accept it with open arms. They're gonna throw you out of their office because they don't like change any more than a lot of other people do. And so I said the strategy is you take the same idea and present it a different way a little while later, and if that doesn't work, you massage it a little bit more. You find yourself presenting the same idea over and over again. I mean, even Doc First, which we talked about before, I mean, that was just a kernel of an idea that I suggested, and people pushed back a little bit, and then I refined it, and then somebody stole it. But that's when I knew it. But that's when it turned out, it was a great idea.
It's a great idea.
That's why they stole it. So it's like, okay, now I know. But yeah, all of that stuff, and even the idea that the idea was stolen from me, in hindsight, may have had a racial component, and maybe the reason that the idea wasn't accepted the first time was because of that as well. And again, I'm just making that connection right now.
I know you don't see it when it's happening.
I don't see it when it's happening, not at all.
One of the things that, and it was in digital, they had a program if people were in a type of career that needed to change, that was kind of being phased out. They had an opportunity to take some courses and go into a different type of field. Now I remember 3 people or so who took a course and became technical writers, and I worked with them, all 3 of them actually. Now, one of the things I can tell in hindsight is that they were suffering some of the problems that we were suffering. One of these people had no ambition, no drive, and was just willing to do nothing. And sat there. And this was not a person of color, but
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yes. And so this person would goof off and then wonder why everyone was getting mad at him. And he was on my team for a little bit too, and I was trying to help out. But there are people who don't take advantage of the situation. They run into an obstacle and they just sit down. And I bring this up because now I have a comparison to what we were doing. And we ran into these obstacles, and then we figured out, we got a problem here. What we can do to reach our goal? And some people don't do that. They hit an obstacle, and they just, whether you had any talent or a skill set or whatever the problem was, I really can't say. But I do know that person failed because they didn't really try.
Well, I might be thinking about a different person. But I remember this one person who worked for me. I'd go by his office. He'd be sitting there reading a book, reading a novel or something.
Yeah. Different person.
Okay, it is a different person. And I said to him, I said, you can't do that. I may not be busy, but you're making me look bad by doing that. Okay. But part of what was going on is that we had back in the old days, they never loaded people 100%. They loaded people 80% with 20% left for research and committees and that sort of thing. So he was taking that 20% and just goofing off, right? I'm like, okay. I said, well, I'm not going to let you get away with that, so I'm gonna load you 100%. And what I did was I just started getting more and more work until he gagged, right? But ultimately, I was able to get it because he hadn't had a raise in like 3 years because he was doing that, right?
He wasn't interested in the education or committees.
Right.
He just wanted to do his job.
Right. And so I said,
And,
okay.
and so the 100% is full-time writing.
Exactly.
Enough writing tasks.
So if you don't want to do this extra stuff, you're going to write.
Yeah.
And so, I'm proud of myself because I did get him a raise after, because I said, look, I got this guy, he's doing like 7 books. He's got all his work. So yeah, he's not doing the committee stuff, but he's doing all this other stuff. So yeah, I got him a raise. Now he didn't appreciate that, but I was proud of the fact that I was able to do that for him. So.
Well, I find another obstacle is jealousy. Or, and that usually comes from insecurity, to be honest. And I remember I faced that a few times. And there was one time when I took a job as leader of a set of committees. And the person that wanted to lead it was well established, had a decent reputation, and loved to lead people. I didn't like the direction he was going in. And so my thought was, well, if I don't say anything, then I have no right to complain.
That's correct.
So I decided to go, okay, well, when they took up the matter, they said, okay, who wants to lead this set of groups? Of course, well. And I thought, well, I'll just throw my hat into the ring and see what happens. I got it. Because there were a lot of other people who were thinking the same thing I was, but they weren't doing anything about it. And yeah, I did suffer a lot of backlash. I was inexperienced in a few things politically. And boy, I got raked over the coals a few times. It was a learning experience.
Well,
but
one of the joys of youth is, as a young manager, we were okay. So one of the senior managers, right, kind of like the department head's right hand man, whatever, wanted to create a special position for. We didn't notice at the time, but it was his girlfriend. So I was trying to create this special position for this person, and put it through as that nobody else, just off to the side. This person would get paid more, blah blah blah. And I'm looking around at everybody because I thought that's ridiculous. You can't do that. And so my style was to ask questions. I said, so are you going to post this position and explain to people what they need to qualify to get that position if they wanted it? And long story short, it was going to be a fait accompli. In other words, they were going to do a vote, and then I decided to ask some questions. So by the end of the meeting, I had half the room on my side and the other half on the director's side, and of course, on the other half on this senior manager's side, right? And of course, the department head had the deciding vote, and she voted with her right hand man, which I understand. I would have done it too if I was in her position. But I was just happy that I was, because people are afraid to say things. I mean, I may be an introvert, I may be quiet, but if something needs to be said, I'm the guy who's going to say it because I don't care.
I've noticed that over the years.
Okay. So yeah, I like I said, I was just having a blast during those years. I was just doing whatever. I never held myself back. And it was fun.
Yeah.
So.
But I did notice, you brought up racism.
Yeah.
And I did notice that some people were, well, I won't, the brashness. You had this dynamic approach. You just went in full steam ahead. Now, for everybody that doesn't know us, you hired me for your group around this time. And right. I was actually looking at a number of other groups I could possibly join because I wanted to do something different. We talked about this in another episode about transitions. I'd done this one product line and I've had enough of it and I needed to do something different. And so you convinced me to work with you. One of the things that I loved was your enthusiasm. Didn't always agree with your decisions, and we had lots of, we'll call them conversations about that.
Right.
But, we worked through that. But I saw that some people were taken aback. And with hindsight, part of that was your dynamic personality coming through and just charging ahead. And some people were taken by that. I think also, I didn't know it at the time, but I think it was slight racism too. It's just, what is this person doing? And well, together as a team, I thought we did great.
Oh, well, the difference, I mean, I think I told the story earlier about this one person, my first day on the job, we kind of ran around me because I said something that he didn't like. He didn't come to me, went to my boss. Out. But the difference between him and you was that if you disagreed with me, we'd sit down and have a conversation.
Right.
That's how we became friends.
Yeah, your enthusiasm or the way you were going, I wanted you to explain yourself to me because if I saw something different, I was more than happy to bring it up to you or anybody else who I reported to.
And that's how we, as a team, all of that. So.
And some of the supervisors that I've worked for, managers, didn't appreciate me doing that.
I can see that based on the people that I remember that were managers at that time.
Yeah. Oh, it isn't all just at that one particular company. You face it again and again and again. But again, we're a little more senior now. You may have mentioned that we kind of had a lot of years of experience, and so honestly, it's a different world. Yes. I mean, now we're the senior people that some people look up to us and wow, he's got experience. I haven't faced the old age popsicle
I have. I'm kind of facing that now, which is why I'm kind of retiring because it's like it's hard to get past the whole talking to people who have less experience than you do. And there are, when I was a manager, I liked having people around me that were smarter than I am and knew something that I didn't. I haven't found that yet. As I've been interviewing, I get the sense that people get intimidated by the fact that, I've been around longer. This stuff that you think is difficult is not so difficult. It's that kind of stuff. So it's hard for me to humble myself to those kinds of people. I'm at that point where I don't want to do it. I don't want to do that anymore.
Throughout my career, I've always taken on a mentoring role. So that comes naturally to me. And so I think maybe that's why I avoid that particular problem.
Well, you're working with friends in your case. You're not out there in the world.
Every time I go to a new startup, I mean, I know the management group.
Yeah, well, that's important. It's important.
Yeah, which is why nobody messes with it.
That's right. I
can tell some funny stories, but we'll leave that for some other time. Yeah. Hey, that wine bottle, I think we're just about to finish our last glass here. I don't know if we should keep on talking or just, maybe wrap this up.
Fine with me.
Well, this is Bob.
And this is Archie.
And we've had a great time talking about this. I think there's we could go on and on about this, but I think you get the idea. And I'm not sure what we're going to talk about in the next episode.
We'll come up with something.
But we'll come up with something. So, everybody, we want to wish you a good day. And thanks again to Sterling-Lancaster Community TV. And thank you, Matt. All right, everybody, take care. Bye.